Welcome back, everybody, to the Europe Grandmasters playoffs, day number 2. And after promising you guys a Thijs match earlier, we do still have one for you coming up now against Casie. And set this up at the start of the day, A-Bar, where as well as Casie bragging of his win rate over Calento, he also said that he has never played Thijs in a competitive match, which is hard to believe. You were saying that, you know, these are two both long-standing players in the Hearthstone competitive community. It's hard to imagine, especially as there's 2 seasons of Grandmasters under their belts now as well, that they just haven't crossed paths until this moment.
Yeah, my first memory of Casie was when he qualified for a season championship back in 2016. Under different circumstances that very well could have been at the same one that Thijs won. He just so happened to already have secured his BlizzCon spot by that time in the year.
Right.
So these two players are certainly ships passing. They are players who have had incredible success in the Europe Hearthstone scene for quite a while now, and we have more or less seen this matchup play out once. Thijs's lineup is, as far as I can see, 2 cards different from Calento's. So we should expect a similar play pattern, I would say.
It's very fitting because Thijs, as a person, is only 2 cards different from Calento. So it's very fitting that their lineups are equally similar. But Casie and Thijs here, I think that matchup did not go as I was expecting it to, I will say. Like, if you look at the 2 matchups that Thijs won against Calento, he won Priest against Highlander Hunter, and he won Druid against Priest, right? In that series, which I would argue that both of those were supposed to go the other way based on the data that we have in Hearthstone Grandmasters. So despite getting through this position once, I am curious to see like what happens here with Thijs in this situation up against Casie, because he did pick up some unfavorable matchups, which kind of just flips everything that I was expecting to be able to talk about going into this series on its head.
Yeah, the matchups we just watched were a bit of an anomaly. I've mentioned the Control Warrior a couple times on Casie's side so far this broadcast. I do not expect the Warrior to be queued, which suggests to me that Casie's going to be relying on his Priest and his Shaman. The Warrior has some tough matchups looking over to Thijs's lineup. Thijs appears to be kicking things off with the Priest in true Season 2 of Grandmasters fashion.
Yeah, no great surprise. A lot of players have been leaning on this Protect Priest and Q Priest first strategy. We talked a lot in the last week about a few players deviating from that and risking queuing Druid first to try and gain some advantages later on in the series. But as you have been saying, that is a 25% matchup in Hearthstone Grandmasters from the side of the Druid, so it does feel like you're taking a huge risk, that you're potentially throwing away a huge percentage by queuing any other deck into Priest than Priest itself and just taking your 50-50.
Again, continuing the theme of this match mirroring Casie versus Calento, we will be kicking things off with the Priest Mirror. What appears to be slightly different this time around is that both players have serviceable hands. Casie's looks a tad stronger, but Thijs has the benefit of kicking the game off on the play, which is where you would prefer to be.
In the light's name.
Yeah, he does also have the opportunity to leverage some of his tempo that he gets from going first alongside that silence that he's drawn in hand. But Casie is now 3 for 3 in Priest Mirrors today, in A, being on coin, and B, having the coin injured Tolvir available to him. He did not play it in one of those games because he was able just to play out a much slower curve because Calento on the other side completely whiffed on his opening. But where it's been available so far, it's a great response to a Light Warden.
Light Warden specifically, it is a decent contest of a Northshire Cleric, but when your opponent leads on exactly Light Warden, this is exactly where you want to be in the Priest Mirror. Thijs already deep in the tank on how to minimize the damage this Tolvir does to his first couple of turns.
Quickly.
He can use the Topsy-Turvy to ensure that he trades 1-for-1 here if he so chooses. That doesn't feel good though, because it's not really a 1-for-1 when you're throwing the Topsy in there.
Right. He's going to do it though. Considers that he gives up too much tempo in order to make this happen.
Is someone injured? Hey!
Sometimes in Hearthstone you have to look away, pretend a turn didn't just happen, reevaluate the board state once those cards are already gone, and just make the correct play as bad as it feels.
Right. Thijs now again still has problems to solve. The fact that yes, he 2-for-1'd himself in that position, but that's not what really matters. What really matters is that he made a turn that conceded a full turn of tempo over to Casie.
Yes.
And Casie was the player going second in the matchup, so he's the player that starts behind on tempo. And just with that one play of the coin-injured Tolvir, Casie is now in control, whereas he gets to dictate trades. If he draws extra arms here, it's potentially very powerful for him. I think that's why you see Thijs throwing out essentially his whole hand here to silence the Northshire Cleric, which, as I said, is a very powerful card in the matchup, but then also drop that Circle of Healing. This is the point I've made many times. That card is nigh on impossible to use in the matchup in the early game, in a situation where it's not going to benefit your opponent as well. So if you can do it, you probably should do it.
Interesting setup here for Casie. He protects the Neferset Ritualist from being value traded over by the injured Blade Master, which leaves Thijs one of two options. Three, I suppose. He could technically just hit Casie in the face for 4 if he feels so inclined. But between these two value trades, the one that takes the fewer stats off the board might very well be more appealing to Thijs because of exactly the threat of Psychopomp. Currently, Casie has 0 minions in his Resurrect pool. Now he has exactly 1, and it is a Northshire.
Yeah, he also has the Tolvir, right?
Oh, correct, yes.
Which, I mean, your point does not change. That is still an insane Psychopomp regardless of the outcome with that pool.
So I'm still curious if there's any consideration ever there to value trading over the Beaming Sidekick rather than the Northshire Cleric.
Right.
Because if you don't, this could happen.
Not only can it, but it did. I think Thijs' turn here, where he just, he tempoed out, he played the Pyromancer. I think he was in a position where if this kind of thing happened, if he drew a spell on the next turn, he was happy dealing with a Northshire Cleric being rezzed. Because he just had the trades to make, and then he would have Pyro to blow up basically the entire Psychopomp board at that point, the 3-1 itself and the 1-1 Cleric that would be reborn. So I think Thijs felt like he was in a fairly comfortable position against the Cleric regardless. And then obviously just in the world where they don't have Psychopomp, it's just good Hearthstone to kill a 1-3 instead of a 1-2, so you have to always consider that option as well.
Casie gives a little shake of the head here, identifying that Thijs has the option to value trade and clear his entire board this turn, but Casie obviously can't be too upset with that with the turn he just took.
Yep.
Prior to that, he has ample resources left in his hand, whereas Thijs playing off the top of his deck. But if you have to play off the top of your deck, Psychopomp was a good place to start there.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that yes, Casie has an enormous resource advantage right now, but he has to have the time to convert those resources into tempo, because this is a tempo-based matchup. This is possibly the most tempo-based matchup in the entire game, because both decks are buff decks, essentially. So if either deck has the board, they snowball out of control incredibly. If either deck doesn't have the board, then they don't have the tools to come back from behind, because it's not what their deck is supposed to do. Whoa, these draws from Thijs. With an empty hand, he is picking up dream minions to keep control of this board state.
So it's counterintuitive with how far behind on resources you are, but if I'm in Thijs' position here, I am interested in trading and protecting my High Priest Amit. I see that as a critical piece to what could eventually lead to me being able to close out this game. It appears he agrees.
Sure. Does cut into your board position quite a lot to do so, though.
It does, but with every turn you spend... Interesting, okay. I was expecting to want to maximize the attack power on that Light Warden in an attempt to potentially start pushing some face damage, but Thijs is valuing the health buff from the High Priest Amit synergy instead.
Very clutch little silence draw there as well from Casie. Choosing to silence the Light Warden over the Armet, which I think does make sense in this position. Thijs is most often just going to draw 1 card this turn. That's rarely going to be a minion with the amount of minions that he's already drawn and played. So even in the case that that one minion comes down, hits the board with the health buff, I think this makes sense, just to say that, like, I need to cut into the power in the board, because as you were talking about on the previous turn, Thijs was very interested in protecting his Armet. I think Casie is much the same here, very much protected in protecting an Armet and a Light Warden of his own.
So if we, on Thijs' side, heal this Wild Pyromancer prior to trades, we can trade the 3 minions on the left side of our board over the High Priest Amit of Casie's without losing any of them.
Yep.
It's a good place to start. Obviously, every heal to one of Thijs' own minions then buffs the Light Warden on Casie's side of the board, which makes Circle of Healing a particularly unattractive draw on this turn.
Quickly.
It's very tough, right? Because what he'd love to at least consider doing, and he might end up not even doing it because of how powerful a cleric draw becomes with this circle, but is just to take a bunch of trades and then use his circle as just, you know, restore 8 health to the board and just pull the stats back into play. But he can't do that because A, he has to kill Amit, B, on the other side of the board, there's just a freaking Light Warden. This board clear, though. I've been talking about Pyro Topsy-Turvy in the Priest Mirrors for it feels like weeks, and I think this is actually the first time it's become relevant.
It was
That
a nice
is
spot from,
such a powerful board clear.
a nice spot from Casie here too, because he had other options to be able to clear this board by value trading over the Amit with his Light Warden and then finishing off the 2 remaining health of Thijs' minions by casting 2 spells, but instead he found a significantly stronger lethal setup by flipping the High Priest Amit, allowing his Light Warden to go face this turn instead of having to wait one more turn, and that will end the game as a result.
And I think just as you see, yeah, that sigh of relief from Casie, he knows that that was a close one. I think that mirrored the similar situation he had against Casie, where he had against Calento, where he had the stronger start.
Yes.
But then he fell behind just on a couple of turns on tempo. And it really was dire. Like, there were positions where I might have even taken Thijs' side of that game.
I agree.
Despite the fact that, you know, Casie had 8-9 cards in hand, because Thijs had the board, and the board is king in the Priest Mirror.
Yeah, at one point the count, I believe, was 4 minions on Thijs' side to 0 on Casie's.
Yes.
It is rare that you see the Priest be able to battle back from that spot. The combination of the effectiveness of High Priest Amit with a very timely Wild Pyromancer draw that you have been attempting to pay off for weeks now in the Priest Mirror.
Got to play the long game, all right? We got there eventually.
Finally comes to fruition, and yeah, Casie's able to expertly navigate the Priest Mirror yet again.
So something that you've been talking about with Casie and Bunny Hopper's lineup is that you feel like they've leaned quite heavily towards Warrior, and that's something that they've whiffed on quite a lot. It's something that we're seeing again in this series. So with these 2 remaining decks on each side, how do you expect things to pan out from here with that in mind?
I am expecting Casie to queue the Shaman for the remainder of the series here, personally. I just don't feel that the Control Warrior lines up particularly well against the options that Thijs has left. So I expect a Game 2 queue of Shaman out of Casie, and if he were to lose, I expect a Game 3 queue of Shaman out of Casie. The question then becomes from Thijs' side, how do we capitalize on that predictability? Going right back to the combo Priest well makes sense to me, and then from there it's a question of Quest Druid versus Highlander Hunter, which deck he feels has a stronger matchup against the Shaman. I personally would argue the Hunter definitively has that since the release of the Tombs of Terror and the introduction of the Desert Hair Evolve combo that is ever so crippling to Druid.
As we get the confirmation here, at least I'm taking this as confirmation that Casie will be queuing that Shaman. I do want to follow up on that question though. Are you saying that just because of how Shaman has improved in the Druid matchup, or do you think Hunter has gained anything to improve it in the Shaman matchup?
It has a lot more to do with the fact that the Quest Shaman has become so much stronger against Druid.
Okay.
That matchup was about 50-50 over the course of Season 2.
Yep.
I know you argued more for the Shaman side to begin with.
By the tiniest of margins.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I think it's very, very close. I agree with that.
I think that in my experience so far in this metagame, and based on how we have seen these players playing out their lineups, there seems to be a consensus that it is heavily Shaman favored now.
Right.
I would rather take my chances with the Hunter.
Fair enough, but we will cross that bridge when we come to it, because right now I think this was the easy prediction to make, much easier than the prediction you had to make at the start of the day, apparently, Abar. Welcome. Welcome to the Caster Curse Club. Hope you feel at home. But I think it was quite predictable that we were going to see Priest versus Shaman here, and Casie did not have success in his first attempt at trying to get over the line in this matchup, which is still very rough, despite the extra power added to the deck by the Evolve package.
And on Thijs' side, we have the goods. I believe the kids call these.
Which of these individual goods, a
Well,
good, if you will, do you think he should play this turn?
we can certainly start with the Northshire Cleric, as pretty much anything that Shaman does on 2 allows Cleric to bump into it, and then Circle of Healing. If Casie happens to develop a 1/1, that then becomes a value trade and you only draw 1 additional card. But if he happens to put the Questing Explorer on the board that he has, all of a sudden that sets up some real madness with the Circle of Healing. My curiosity was whether he develops his Light Warden alongside it, and I am happy to see that he does.
It's the right way.
Yeah, this gives him all of the options, right? Where he can choose to take just a bump and heal turn, he can choose to have a bump circle turn, but he also just plays enough vanilla stats to be able to naturally take care of an evil totem this turn, which I think is also quite important.
Thijs with a couple of options here. He can develop this Light Warden first, and then bump the Cleric into the Questing Explorer, cast Circle of Healing, drawing 2 cards that allows his Light Warden to trade into the Questing Explorer or simply go face. As a follow-up, the kicker to that is he has 1 mana remaining after the Circle of Healing. If he is able to find a Power Word Shield, all of a sudden the Light Warden value trades over the Questing Explorer.
Or a Beaming Sidekick as well. There's actually a lot of outs in this spot.
Okay, those aren't them. Breath of Life for Casie, perhaps.
Does trade. Very responsible trade, we shall call it, from Thijs. Is there a significant punish there for leaving a 2/3 on the board in that spot?
Sludge Slurper comes to mind. I mean, there are lackeys that could all of a sudden turn that into a value trade for Casie.
Okay.
I wouldn't have faulted the punch in the face there myself.
Yeah.
It was certainly razor thin. I think Thijs was thinking about a lot of things that turn that he deemed more relevant to making sure he executed that turn than whether that damage was punch face or not. I respect the value trade, or straight up trade rather. And here we go.
Hey, his 1-drop killed a 2-drop. That's still a VT where I come from.
We take those. Desert Hair Evolve.
Pinata, this new Shredder summons a 2-drop from his hand, right? Yeah, 2 or less from his hand, which is actually a pretty significant problem for Casie right now. He does not want these minions in play without activating their battle cry.
Shaman stats or Shaman minions in Quest Shaman are not known for their stat efficiency.
No.
But rather their battle cry effects that come at the cost of the reduced stats on those minions. Doesn't exactly synergize with the piloted Shredder. But all in all, I'm not too unhappy with the polls here if I'm Casie. My board has decent amount of resilience that could set up some value trades followed by the second evolve to then take my chances with the pool of 5 drops that I get.
Sure.
Additionally, if the Shredder were to die and the minion that comes out of it sticks to the board, that's just 1 extra thing you have to then evolve. It doesn't matter what the stats.
Yeah, that is fair, yeah. Depending on what he draws off the top, he might have mana constraints on what he's doing this turn.
Quickly.
Thijs would ever have, if nothing came out of that Shredder, Thijs could have Clear Fire to trade with the Pinata and protect his Light Warden. I think is something he was considering.
We go again, A-Bar.
We sure do.
Okay. White Mane is kind of interesting.
Divine Shield on a 4/3 is rather nice.
Yes. That is a very, very average outcome from Casie. 3/4 is the average stat line on a 4-drop, and 2 out of 3 having some kind of upside is about right. Obviously, the Bellringer does not actually have any upside in Casey's deck, but it does technically have a Death Rattle, which would be accounted into those statistics.
We will very likely reach a phase of the game where Thijs stops trading and moves in on one of these minions.
Yeah.
At which point this White Mane could actually become a significant factor in this game that Thijs couldn't possibly account for.
No. What are you going to do? Play around every legendary in the game? That doesn't sound exciting.
You don't?
No! I don't play around one-offs. Makes playing against Highlander decks really exciting.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Then your opponent isn't playing.
And then Baby Rage, my opponent played cards. It's just every single game. It's one of those turns where the timer did start to run out on him. Not sure if Thijs is completely happy with where this turn ended up. Quest only just now completed this turn. And still that cleric can't go down. Rush Lackey and Snipe Lackey, Damage Lackey would have taken care of the cleric in that position.
Healing Totem. You hate to see that.
Sure do.
You hate to see that for two reasons. Obviously, the fact that it just immediately drew Thijs 2 cards, but also in the event that Thijs stops trading into Casie's minions, Casie actually wants them to be at low health so that it becomes more convenient for him
Trade them off.
to activate the High Inquisitor Whitemane.
So, I mean, I have to ask the question, why did Casie even press the hero power button there? Is the upside of the Taunt Totem worth this downside?
So if it was exactly the Taunt Totem, obviously it's rather valuable here. Spell damage and the 1/1 are both relatively insignificant.
Yep.
So it was almost a direct trade-off between the value of the Taunt Totem and the downside of the Healing Totem.
And I feel like that is very skewed in this direction, where this downside was a lot higher than the upside of the Taunt Totem.
I am inclined to agree with you, but questioning if I am being too results-oriented
Sure.
in agreeing with you.
Sure. Welcome to the other Caster Curse.
Both evolves are gone, so simply putting a totem on the board for the sake of potentially having an extra 2-drop later on down the line is not a factor in Casey's decision.
Right. He does still play the card Mogu Flesh Shaper, which can end up being relevant. With the 1 increased minion on board, so he needs to draw that. But Casie is going to have to fight the long game here, and that is not going to be easy to do in this position. Faceless, Faceless? Oh. Casie and Faceless Lackey name a more iconic duo.
Casey seemed upset, but Titanic Lackey doesn't seem like the end of the world here.
I think he's just still tilted. I don't know how much you saw of his previous series, but he got nothing but Faceless Lackeys in the entire series. Slight exaggeration, he got like 1 or 2 non-Faceless Lackeys out of like 8 or 9 rolls on Lackeys, and one of his Faceless Lackeys rolled him a Doomsayer. So I think he just has a little bit of a residual grudge against Faceless Lackey right now.
So I was watching, and frankly, I personally was enjoying it so much that I forgot to factor in that might be upsetting from the player side of things.
Fair enough.
I found it wildly entertaining. Do we ever get to hit our hero power button and then play this Whitemane at some point this game?
Oof.
Because that is a battle cry.
It is.
For those of you who aren't familiar, because Whitemane was fairly recently added to the game, the battle cry effect on that minion is that it resummons all of your minions that died this turn. So if you had maybe 2 minions die through trades over the course of the turn, you hero power play that thing, you get them both back twice.
Yeah, so this board of 7 minions, if he trades this all in and then hero powers his Whitemane, all hell
Imagine the
breaks
possibilities.
loose. Yeah. It's a card that you can force from Zephyrus in certain situations. If you trade a bunch of minions first and then play your Zephyrus with 7 or more mana remaining, you will quite often get offered a Whitemane. In fact, Thijs, in a fitting little moment, was a player who I believe was victim of that, where he traded a minion first and then played a Zephyrus looking for a Tyrion, and was given the Whitemane instead.
Zephyrus tries to lead you to the perfect card, but you really have to hold its hand along the way.
Oh yeah, the relationship is the other way around. You have to teach Zephyrus what you want on any given turn. Trading your minions first is a good way to make it think you want a High Inquisitor Whitemane. somehow Casie is still playing Hearthstone this game, Abar. I don't know how that's happened.
I think Thijs is playing a lot of respect to mind control tech, because from his perspective, I mean, he could simply play this Amit, develop a pile of minions onto the board, and then he has Divine Spirit Interfire to back it up. But that also opens a window of opportunity for Casie to mind control tech the critical minions that Thijs needs on his side of the board. And then from there, Thijs might not be able to recover the board state. And so I think he's intentionally trying to take it slow thus far this game. It looks like he may feel the clock is now ticking as the Quest Shaman's mana total is increasing, and that Battle Cry doubling effect can quickly turn a game around if you ignore it long enough.
Yes. Thijs says I can end this turn with 3 minions in play anyway and still be potentially threatening a lethal setup. Looks like he is going to overextend though. This is totally fine. I was going to make the argument that in this position, all of your minions are critical, right? So like if one of them gets stolen, you still have a bunch of other stuff that threatens lethal.
You saw Casie praying. I think he was looking for the mind control tech and hoping to follow it up perhaps by taunting whatever large minion he stole.
Well, if you need a bit of good news, Abar, we could get 2 World Kick Masters back this turn.
Frankly, I feel like from Casey's position, I might take that. You know, I'm relatively close to tapping out of this one.
Yes.
I would like to double my white main this turn. What about you, Saddle? Sorry, I'm asking the man who is strictly no fun. This is the wrong audience for this question. Someone bring me Dan.
I certainly, on ladder, would have played my white main, did the thing, and then conceded immediately.
I suppose the stakes are a tad higher in this match.
I would agree with that. Playoff spot on the line, or at least a continued playoff spot, a Sunday's final spot on the line for these 2 players. Both of them have that 1 loss to their name up till this point. Thijs defaulted to it by being the 4th place finisher in the league up until this point. And so this is the last chance saloon for both of these players.
In the light's name.
As cool as some of these interactions are, I think they are more interested in trying to win the game. But I think Casie is quickly running out of options to do that.
Casie looking for exactly a way to find Ethereal Lackey here. Followed up by Plague of Murlocs off of it. That is his last hope. Because it would take a couple of Earthquakes to clear this one.
It sure would.
Yes.
Are you happy now, Abar?
Yes.
Are you happy now?
Why didn't we get 2 Flesh Shapers? Oh, come on. Could have traded that into the injured Blade Master first.
Wait, you're not wrong, right?
Yeah.
Board space? Question mark. Does that get messed up? I don't really know.
I mean, I think Casie has put the pieces together here that is extremely likely that Thijs had lethal.
Almost completely irrelevant whatever he did that turn. Like you said, he needed spell lackey situations, or he needed some absolute insane sequence of things into a Mogu that then evolves into like a batter head, and like I don't know, something that was able to take off enormous amounts of health away from that board, but even then doesn't seem like a reality. So I think Casie, as we were saying, just kind of did the thing, so the thing was done, and then I think he was kind of checked out because there were 2 cards left in Thijs' deck at that point. Like the buffs and the inner fire were going to be there in Thijs' hand.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up if there was even any iteration of cards in Thijs' hand where he didn't either already have the Divine Spirit Interfire or was able to draw them. I'm pretty sure that was a completely solved lethal setup that turn, but regardless, good on Casie for sticking it out to the very end, and as expected, he goes right back to the Quest Shaman well, as I set up prior to the previous game. Now, the moment of truth for me is what Thijs chooses to counter this with. Again, I said I personally would lead toward the Hunter here. I also talked, as I cast the last series with Dan, about how Thijs really values his Druid. He thinks very highly of the Druid deck. If you watch his stream, he speaks of it as perhaps the best deck in the metagame.
Wow.
He
Okay.
is incredibly proficient with this deck. It is very much in his playstyle, and because it is Thijs, this does not surprise me whatsoever to see the Druid.
Opening hand Chef Nomi here for Thijs. That could potentially be a big downside for him. He is basically -1 card in hand here throughout his opener. Floop kind of dead for the time being as well.
Yeah, this particular build of Druid from Thijs is playing the Chef Nomi. It does not have King Feoris, which is somewhat of a liability against Druid, but is relatively akin to swapping a dead card for a dead card.
Sure. Well, with that Floop in hand, I know where my mind's going.
To a card that is very far from ever being called dead, I imagine.
Yes. Oasis Surger picked
Of course
up,
it's the right way.
and now Thijs has the thing, as I refer to it in Druid, because I feel like whenever I play against Druid with any deck, that's the only thing that beats me in their deck. Like Oasis Surger into Floop, that's what I lose to. Everything else, it seems I can beat. Dead turns coming out from Thijs, though. You can start to see some of the logic now as to this idea that Casie and Bunny Hopper had, where they replaced, you know, this card, Chef Nomi, whatever the equivalent would be in the deck, with a Baleful Banker,
Yes.
which at the very least becomes a playable card if you want a 2/2 on the board. If you want to shuffle some other important minion in the matchup into your deck in the early game or mid game, you can do that. Whereas the other options are completely unplayable. And, you know, in their words, like the Baleful Banker just completely destroys the warrior matchup anyway, which is a lot of what this Chef Nomi is going to be in the deck for as well from Thijs. It's a pretty interesting way that they approached it. But I think, interestingly, because their like read on the metagame as to what everyone else was playing was kind of off, we just haven't seen that warrior be played ever from Casey's side so far.
Which is something you can do in Shield Phase Conquest. Like, you can bring a deck in your lineup with zero intention of ever queuing it in 80% of the matchups you expect to see. It is a perfectly reasonable strategy if you feel it is a silver bullet that is the difference between winning or not winning other lineup matchups.
Tell you what is the difference between winning and not winning, and that is an Evolve against Druid, and that is some Evolve. 2 Spider Tanks, one of which with significant upside off his 3 drops. 2-1 off the 2 drop is kind of mediocre. And then a 5-4 Divine Shield 5 drop as well to go alongside that. That is a pretty strong outcome from Casey's side.
Did you even mention the Reckless Dire Troll and all that? I think you passed over the 3-mana 2/6
I
taunt.
did. I'm so sorry. You are right.
History buff is kind of insane, actually, in
Yeah,
Quest
it's
Druid.
like the actual nuts. Just has 3 lackeys in hand with a history buff on board.
What?
And this is the power spike I was referencing that I feel is the reason that the Shaman is now favored in this matchup. I feel that you keep Evolve in this matchup, even though you would not keep Desert Hair without the Evolve, because the Evolve can kind of do this without the hair.
Right.
The hair sucks without the Evolve.
Sure. So Casie now has to think Starfall, he has to think Oasis Surger, but he also has to think, and I think this is the one that people sometimes miss, right? Like, I think people very easily get scarred. They're like, well, I'm going to underplay here because I don't want to get blown out by Oasis Surger or Starfall. You also have to think, what if they nourish and then I just get to hit them really, really freaking hard with all my minions?
Couldn't agree more.
Whoa!
Cobalt Lackey is like, yo, I heard you were real sick of my faceless friend. I got your back, buddy. Now's the time.
Happy birthday, kid. I'm here right on time. Am I late to the party? No, we're good? All right.
So, Thijs, as far as I can see,
What to do?
okay, I was just about to say that I'm not sure he has the luxury of nourishing this turn. He disagrees. Apparently, he's going to develop the Anubisoth, and I'm guessing if he's going down this route, he plans on cashing in this Floop right now as well. I would have liked to see Oasis Surger personally.
Behold, jewels of the sands.
This play is particularly weak to Sandstorm Elemental. is what I was about to say. As
dead.
the second one comes off the top of Casey's deck, and my quick math say the same.
I believe he is dead. I didn't even consider it the Sandstorm way. He was just dead to trade your minions, play your Cobalt lackeys, as far as I counted it.
Yeah, so there's 10 power left on board and 3 Cobalt lackeys. Board space. Board space.
Oh, board space was certainly an issue. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's why he chose to do it this way.
Yeah, Casey's way makes more sense. For sure, either way, the definitive statement there, he is dead, was accurate. And Thijs took a big risk there with the Nourish, it has to be said. He didn't have the dream defensive option. Like, I think a Starfall there with the Anubisaf defender would have been the most defense that he could have done that turn. He didn't have that luxury available, so I certainly understand the, well, you know, how often does my opponent have 3 Cobalt lackeys in his hand? Yeah. Line of thinking in that position. And also casting that Nourish, you could see it's actually pretty critical that Casie got over the line that turn, because the Ferocious Howl was there, the Hidden Oasis was there, he would have drawn AoE off the Nourish as well, and so on. So I think I'm okay with that decision from Thijs. You in the same camp?
Yeah, that's definitely the argument for the Nourish turn, is you give the Druid an inch and it takes a mile. It has massive tempo swings to follow that up with the additional mana crystals that it unlocks from that position. So I am okay with the calculated risk from Thijs. I'm surprised at how quickly he did it, frankly. He's not the fastest player in the world, and he immediately reached for that Nourish. My brain went to the Oasis Surger.
Yeah.
I'm actually genuinely curious if playing against Casie sped him up a little bit on that critical decision.
Yeah, I imagine it might have done as well, because you couldn't even finish your sentence. You're like, well, I don't think he has the... Oh, the Nourish has already happened.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Thijs did not really take too much time on it, and it's something that I talked about in the previous match where it was Casie versus Jarla. Jarla is perhaps the slowest player that we have in Hearthstone Grandmasters, and Casie the fastest. And I always do find that dynamic is interesting as to like who's going to fall into who else's pace in the matchup. But either way, that win, most importantly, does now mean that you see Casie joins Jarla. Mr. Slow and Mr. Fast have both made it out of Europe Division B. But we had a lot of fantastic matches today. It's gone by very, very quickly. I don't know if that's the reality or whether it feels like that, but it does feel like we've had an incredible pace. And maybe the fact that Casie has played 3 matches today has something to do with that, Aba.
The tortoise and the hare both made it to the finish line regardless of their contrasting styles. But yes, you saw Desert Hare. Yeah, I was trying to work in the joke. What's the ornery tortoise?
Ornery tortoise.
Ornery tortoise, there we go. That would have been the better version. But yeah, we saw a whole lot of Casie today, 3 matches in total. That will certainly speed up the length of a broadcast.
I'm actually writing down Ornery Tortoise and the Desert Hare because that's actually just fire, and we're using that now forever. You can see as we go into Sunday, we have a very, very clear picture as to what our Final Four is going to look like. Hunter Ace versus Jarla in the Nordavind showdown between the two of them. They are, I believe, 2 of Europe's absolute best. I have spent all season drawing parallels between these 2 players and basically painting the picture that with just a little run of rub of the green here and there, with a little luck here or there, Jarla could have been Hunter Ace. Like, the roles could have been reversed. They both came up in a very, very similar pattern. I think they both have a very similar quality of play as well. And that's not to take anything away from the matchup on the other side either. Silvername versus Casie. I think Casie, of course, is a huge fan favorite, at least to me. I'm not sure that's how the phrase fan favorite really works. I just decide that you all love Casie because I love Casie. But then Silvername, of course, does have a huge community behind him as well, being such a big streamer and being such a figure for the Russian community as well. And I think he is fully deserving of his spot at this position as well, because I said yesterday, if there was an award for most improved going into Season 2, I think I would give it to Silvername.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to you and Dan discuss how Jarla was part of the new blood, players who might be making their first World Championship appearance. I think it's important for people to remember it would not be his first BlizzCon appearance. This man won the Hearthstone Global Games along with his national team, so he's used to the big stage as well. An absolutely great redemption story out of Silvername. He was a player that we questioned not for his skill, but for his deck choices. We were wondering if perhaps he was entertaining that massive fan base that he has. But with everything on the line, he really turned it around and picked up some crucial wins along the way.
Yeah, and I am really excited for that Jarla versus Hunter Ace matchup specifically. As you said, he did win HGG alongside the Team Czech Republic, but I think at that time, a lot of the spotlight was being shone on Stan Sivka in that situation, and the narrative was that he was kind of leading the team, and I always felt that was a little bit unfair towards Jarla, who I think is a player who is on that same level of caliber, and I think that top 4 from Europe is stacked, but I think any top 4 that we could have ended up with would have been as well.
Such is the nature of Hearthstone Grandmasters. We have a lot of good players here, Saddle.
Yes, we do, and we have 4 more fantastic players coming up for you now from the Americas region. Do not go anywhere. Myself and Prodan will be back to kick off Americas region for you guys.